Hello, friends and listeners, party people. Welcome back to another episode of Party XP. I'm your host, Lakan, and joined once again is my friend Jeff. Say hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
And for the close listeners of our show, you may have noticed that when I said hi, Jeff, as well in the previous episode, it sounded a little different, right? So for this episode as well, I have my friend Jeff Fernandez hopping in, filling in for the regular co-host Jeff Kenobi. So Jeff, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit.
All right. Hi, I'm Jeff, the other Jeff. Yeah. It's kind of funny. Like, how would I really introduce myself? Like, okay, Lakan, you and I are church buddies. I've known you for like forever.
Yeah, we've been
but then
friends since
it's
I was
not.
a kid, basically.
Yeah, but not limited to church, because then
We hang out.
obviously we went to Comic-Con together, and do all kinds of other crazy, interesting stuff. And with that context, I used to get assigned to teach all over the place, and you'd come along. So definitely have been out exploring together. So yeah.
Yeah, like nerd buddies, right? We go to conventions together. We travel, or we used to travel around a lot more back in the day, right? We used to go to like up to Boston and like down south a little bit as well too, just cause sometimes, right? We just wanted to just hit up some spots and get food together. That was a big thing. We used to just get food, and like we'd hear about a spot, we just go for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like we used to do like meetups and talk about books and movies and stuff like that. Just hang out and just talk about stuff that we've been watching or reading at the time and just chat about it, right? So it kind of also works out perfectly for this format of show, right?
Exactly. And especially given the context that, I mean, apart from the fact that you guys start out as more like a gaming kind of thing, you know me, I'd like to game. Adult life doesn't permit it quite so much.
Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, we started off as mostly gaming stuff, and we do still do a lot of game stuff. But we talk about, I've absolutely talked about like books that I've been reading, or manga or anime that I've been watching, or and especially movies. Like we did the whole John Wick trilogy already, right, so far, and then we have John Wick 4 just came out, so rest in peace, Lance Reddick. But we talk about like other shows and series and stuff, and I'm sure I want to get into more of that stuff with Jeff as well when his life settles down a little bit more for him. But I mean, if you're here right now, right, we can go ahead and we're gonna do a little bit of filling in and do some other shows and stuff aside as well. So this week I'm going to be giving you a show here that I think we mentioned it before in like passing conversation, right? I don't think we've actually like talked about it too much in detail because you haven't gotten around to it yet. So this episode, we're going to be watching Andor. How much have you heard about this show?
I actually heard a lot because I've seen Rogue One, and for those who aren't familiar with it, Andor is part of that whole Star Wars multi-universe. Looking forward to it because Andor was one of the characters from Rogue One. Rogue One was great, but haven't seen it yet. And it's kind of funny because there's a whole bunch of stuff that I haven't seen, haven't done, and you're like, how come you haven't seen it yet? So now's the perfect opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is the force you actually watch the show, right? So yeah, like it's part of the like Star Wars extended universe, I guess, if we want to call it that nowadays. It's weird ever since Disney got a hold of LucasArts, right? Or like so once they got a hold of the Star Wars property, it's weird to call it if it's the extended universe or not, because it's we're not acknowledging the books and other media, right? But yeah, Andor's in the same universe as Rogue One, and all of the Star Wars movies, right? So Andor is a science fiction action adventure spy thriller-ish limited series produced by Tony Gilroy and is streaming on Disney Plus. It was announced in 2018, premiered on September 21st, 2022, with 3 episodes. And then the rest of the season released weekly, which is kind of a weird way to go about it, but cool, why not, right? I'm sure it absolutely helped to pull people in on the first watch, because we can binge the first little bit of it.
Right. I actually kind of enjoy that, instead of like someone being able to binge it in one weekend, like this was great, and then spoilers all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I haven't even started yet. So,
yeah.
I do appreciate that.
I kind of like missed the weekly release thing myself as well, and we can talk about that a little bit more later when we actually get around to the show and talk about like watching habits, I guess, right? So this serves as a prequel to Rogue One in 2016 and the original Star Wars film, originally in 1977. it takes place 5 years before both of those movies, because Rogue One happens literally right before A New Hope, right? It stars Diego Luna as Cassian Andor, and the cast is pretty big. There's a lot of like people you've like probably seen in shows and movies, but like you maybe some people you like won't know their name, but like a lot of people who are definitely recognizable in this show. You'll definitely see some people around, and you can definitely it's gonna be one of those things where like I'm always like pausing, like picking out like, do I know this person? I feel like I've seen them before, type of deal. That's how I felt when I was watching it. Filming was done at Pinewood Studios in London, and on location in random places in the or not random, but like on location in various places around the United Kingdom.
You mean it wasn't filmed in space?
Yeah, I know. Oh my god, where's the realism? How dare they?
Yeah, come on, Elon, let's cook it up.
Yeah. So like I really enjoyed the show. I watched it like 3-ish times already now, like all together.
Oh dang, I gotta get my weight up.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a good show. Like it genuinely is a very, very good. I very much so enjoyed it. Just a little bit of like background, I guess, on like what I've noticed anyway. Reviews for the show are overall positive, but I have seen pockets of infighting between different levels of fans online after I had finished watching the show once. Like when I watched the show the first time, I caught the first 3 episodes, right? Or I think I caught the first 4 episodes actually. I missed when it first released. And then I was watching it weekly after that, and so I was kind of following along with it during like it's like his biggest hype season, essentially, when it first came out, and I enjoyed it. I very much so enjoyed it. And then after the show, there's always the weird levels of like Star Wars fandom, right? There's like the mega fans versus the fans who want different stuff, and the fans who want just more of the same but different. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of that I saw online, so I'm like, I tend to stay away from that stuff, but I did want to see what their opinions were on it, and yeah, I just lost brain cells. I just wanted to enjoy it myself personally, and I did happen to enjoy it myself. So, how big are you into Star Wars stuff?
Oh, I am. Well, man, that's the thing, because I'm kind of middle ground. Like, grew up with Star Wars, love the Holy Trilogy. The first trilogy, kind of like toss that aside. Definitely get rid of 1, get rid of I think 8, and I'm kind of okay.
That's not a bad way to look at it. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. I like that idea.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like, because like once again, just like Marvel, there's just way too much stuff.
We could also get rid of. We could also get rid of 9. To be fair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We don't acknowledge 8, 9, or 1. That's fair. That's perfectly fine.
That being said, you can kind of toss out 7 too. So honestly, just stick with 4, 5, and 6. If they left it at that, I'd be a perfectly happy camper. Kind of like what happened with the Matrix. Like, stick with the original Matrix movie. No sequels, no nothing. I'm happy. I'm good.
Yeah. What about extended stuff? Do you know a whole lot about the extended universe before Disney basically wrote it all off?
Yeah. No, I mean, I read a couple of the books. Cool.
Okay, so you know a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like because this technically acts within the same within the actual same, like, because it's not multiverses, right? It's just one extended universe, essentially, like one extended like storyline, essentially. Yep. This leads directly into Rogue One, which directly leads into A New Hope. So it's like it's a cool fact that like you kind of see all this stuff building up towards like the beginning of the Star Wars story, where most people caught into it in Star Wars Episode 4. Okay. Yep. But yeah, it's a good show. I'm not trying to influence what your opinion on is when you actually watch it.
Actually, I do have to ask though, Lakan, like, so what's? I mean, I'm a bit of a warsy, not like totally, crazy into it, kind of thing, but yeah, what's your level of involvement with Star Wars?
I am a little bit further in than you are, I would say, because I've played a lot of the video games. I've read a couple of the books as well too. But like the video game stuff is like I played the MMO for a little bit as well. So there's a bit more expansion to it there. But again, it doesn't matter because it's been retconned by Disney, because so they just chose to just say screw all of it. But in terms of like overall story, I enjoy Star Wars. I can't call myself a mega fan, like a super fan or whatever, but I do enjoy it. There has been questioning of that in the last couple of years, mostly because of the sequel trilogy, where I was like, do I even like Star Wars? Like I had that kind of moment. But Yeah, like for overall, I enjoy Star Wars, and I think I enjoy it more than like I guess the casual watcher, if I can call it that, I guess.
Okay, got
Yeah,
it.
I've watched all of the Disney Plus. You know, it's weird. We're in a different era, right? We're in the Disney. I've watched all the Disney Plus properties of Star Wars so far. I've enjoyed the slight I've enjoyed the resurgence of like the Bad Batch, you know, from the Clone Wars era type of animation stuff. But yeah, I enjoy Star Wars overall.
Okay,
Um,
and that's the thing, because like I'd love to get into Rebels and Clone Wars and stuff. Just
yeah, don't worry about it.
yeah,
Just watch whatever you can and watch whatever you're actually interested in. That's perfectly fine. But yeah, and like again, Andor is a pretty good overall show. I think even for a person who's not super into Star Wars, and this is only the first season of it. There's going to be a second season, and then that'll be it for my understanding of the show.
really
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, I guess for now we're gonna go ahead and end it here. There's gonna be a short break. For us, it'll be a week or two. For you guys, it'll be about 5-10 seconds. And when we're back, we'll talk about how Jeff feels about Andor.
Psyched about it. Let's do this.
Okay, listeners, we are back. It has been 2 weeks, and Jeff has finally gotten to go ahead and finish off Andor. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, loved it. It's kind of funny because I had really wished that I had watched it at the same time when it was being released, and yeah, it would have been good to have, joined in whatever conversations were going on in real time. When's it going to happen? What's happening here? A lot of, a lot of whatever discussions were going on. But it's interesting that only a handful of people around me watched it.
Yeah, same thing for me. It's funny because I remember when all my friends got in on Mandalorian, everyone was like loving it. I was super late to the game and watched Mandalorian like end of last year. And then I caught on Andor because I saw Andor had just started, and I was watching it. I caught the first 3 episodes because those 3 were essentially released together, right? And then episode 4 had just released, and I was like, how is no one talking about this? None of my group of friends were talking about it. I think it's probably my favorite like piece of Star Wars media in like a while. Like as much as I enjoyed The Mandalorian, but like this, I think this is probably my favorite piece of like Star Wars media. And
Yeah, it's definitely up there with me. Yeah.
and I think again at the time it's like I feel like no one was watching this, which is crazy to me because I think it's so well written. Let's get into the show actually then. From my understanding, when I was reading up a little bit on articles and watching some interviews and stuff like that, basically the writing for the show felt like it was meant to be more accessible to like a wider audience, right? Not just Star Wars fans. And I think it does that very, very well. Because we talked about it before where I have a bit more Star Wars knowledge than you do. Because for you it's mostly just the original trilogy, right?
The Holy Trilogy.
Yeah. Well, that, and you of course I'm sure you watched the prequel trilogies as well, obviously, to depending whatever your feelings may be on them, you watched them. And
yeah, we're gonna forget about those.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I could remember the prequel trilogy, and I'd rather forget about the sequel trilogy personally.
Both. Yeah.
Yeah, but like so, and I played the games, and I know some of the backstory from the games. I've read some comics, but like it's just some really, really good writing, and again, it's just really, really genuinely appreciable for people who are not Star Wars fans, like a rebel spy flick.
Yeah, a political thriller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely felt a lot more House of Cards than I felt like typical Star Wars pew pew laser sword fights, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Exactly, which is interesting because I got into it, and that's one of the reasons why I like Star Wars and why I've loved Star Wars for however long, because of the whole like force, pew pew, laser sword, lightsabers, laser swords, that kind of thing. And this is totally on the other end of the scale.
There's just a very different foundation, I think, overall for this show, and very different direction that the show was intending to go to, and I think it did a really good job of it, especially to like move away from the typical space magic aspect of the Star Wars canon, right? The show plays out in like short arcs, essentially. The first 3 episodes get released all together. You can binge those, and then every episode after that was weekly. And
right, I wish I watched it that way.
I wish so too, so that way if you and me caught at the same time, so we could actually talk about this show. Because again, I was reaching for people who had even seen the show in the first place. The show was essentially done in 3 episode arcs for the most part. From my understanding of the online discussion and like articles written about the show, is that like there are a couple episodes that are essentially kind of like standalone episodes that kind of tie everything together. But let's go with the beginning of the show, I guess. Then, for the first arc of the show, it's relatively not standard, but we just see Cassian. We see Cassian Andor basically, right? That's the whole thing. They build the story around him. Like the first thing we hear about him is he's looking for his sister, and then we get to see his interactions with the people of his local town, city of Ferrix, right?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, was it the planet or was it just the city?
Yeah, I don't know how that I don't know how that works, because it always feels that way when I hear about Coruscant. They just talk about all of Coruscant. They don't ever talk about a city, right?
Right.
But yeah, so we basically see like the interactions with him, his group of friends, right? Like we see his coworker at the factory that he works at. We see his friend Bix, you know, who helps move the story along later on down the line. Listener, by the way, there's gonna be some light spoilers here. We might go into a little bit of it here, but if you're scared of spoiling yourself, pause the episode here, go watch Andor, come back to this one. We're not gonna go super hard into details here, but there may be some things we're gonna cover that may hurt your experience if you hear about it before you actually watch it.
And yeah, dear listener, just in case, go watch Andor anyway. Because Lakan enjoyed it, I enjoyed it, we both loved it. So yeah, take a pause so you can join it. You know, you can enjoy the conversation a lot more.
Yeah, especially if you know what the hell we're actually talking about, you know, instead of us just spoiling it and then you going to find out later to watch it yourself, and you know now you're piecing things together backwards. But yeah, so again we see the first arc essentially is just kind of setting up the story for us. How Cassian, who seems to be this kind of like slick, sly kind of character, right? We see him kind of like, you know, schmooze his way around. You know, he's not super upright citizen from what it looks like, right?
Yeah, he's a smart street rat.
Yeah, basically. There's essentially like an exciting action of him killing two officers who were also like shaking him down. So we get to see right off the bat of this show is like we see this show's a little bit gritty, you know, like it's not like the typical clean Star Wars that we have been kind of used to, especially if you watched like a lot of the more recent properties of it, I guess, or the recent projects that they've put out. A lot more of the a lot more of like a darker, grittier story, I think, that we get to focus on within the Star Wars universe.
Oh, definitely. And that's one of the things that sets Andor apart from pretty much all the other Star Wars stuff, at that it's actually adult. Not adult in like the rated R kind of way, but much more than say the original Star Wars, any of the canon movies. Because, you know, once again, Andor, you know, kills the guy in kind of in cold blood. You know, he kills one guy by accident, but then the other guy, he shoots him in the face. Whereas, you know, in previous Star Wars, he would kind of walk away, let him be, and the guy would still be alive. But no, he just in the face.
Yeah. We see a little bit of it, I guess, where like Han is, right? That's if we're talking about like original trilogy, Han is kind of that guy, right? Where he's like he kind of rides the line of like good and bad. Because with the Star Wars stuff, especially if you're watching it from like a very clean cut sensibility, it very much tells you who's the good guys and who's the bad guys.
Right.
With this show, I think they do a very good job of showing you that like the quote unquote good guys have to do bad things to make things happen, you know, to move things along, basically. So yeah, the first arc essentially is kind of just building up backstory on who is Cassian, why should we care about him as a character. I mean, if you watch Rogue One, you know he's a cool character in the first place. Or not a cool character, but you may have liked him already in Rogue One. So it's like a lot of like, again, who's the people around him, a little bit of history of like who he was and how he kind of came to be as who he is as a person. And then we see his early interactions with him in the Rebel Alliance. There's a couple major characters here, like Luthen, who's is a major point for this show.
Yep, one of my favorite characters. Yep.
Yeah, and Luthen is basically not an arms dealer, but like, what is he? I guess what would you call him? I guess he's kind of like he kind of runs things from the shadows, I guess.
Yeah,
for the rebellion. But while he also interacts with like the quote unquote higher class people of like Coruscant, like the politicians and all this other stuff, right? I guess.
Yeah. On a murder board, you know those those boards where like the red strings attached to faces and stuff. He'd be one of the people right in the middle.
Yeah,
I think he would be right in the middle.
Probably. Yeah. He's very much intertwined with like the backroom workings of the rebellion, and like interacting with like the front facing politicians basically of this universe or this galaxy, and while secretly working for the rebellions and trying to keep people off their tail. For the most part, in this first arc, we don't really see a whole lot of action. We have a little bit right in the beginning because again he kills two officers after like a short after an altercation, right? And then we kind of see like some people are trying to investigate what happened to those two officers. Who is Andor? From the authorities essentially of that area, and that kind of kicks things off to why we care about Cassian and why the Empire starts to care about Cassian. Anything else we should probably touch on there before we move on to the next arc?
I mean, unless you want to talk about the third episode where things really, really, start to pick up speed.
Oh yeah. So essentially, what happens? I guess essentially he's being investigated for the death of the two officers. One of the officers from the security bureau. What's it called? The
Oh, you mean the Ferrex Rent-A-Cops?
Yeah, basically, yeah, them. They do a little bit of groundwork, and they keep it leads them to Cassian, and they basically try to corner him so they can bring him in for an investigation and stuff. We end up with this really cool action, like our first real bit of action, like with them in like a warehouse of Luthen and Cassian trying to escape from the security forces of Ferrex, and which creates a lot of like problems for them locally, right? The security officers locally, while Luthen's trying to convince Cassian to join the Rebel Alliance.
Right. Because there are two things going on here. One is the murder of those two security guards. The two Rent-A-Cops somewhere else, and then there's the whole thing about the Star Path unit, which is how Luthen comes in because it's a piece of stolen Imperial technology, something that's pretty important, something that's in their inventory. So those are the two threads that kind of lead them towards, finding Cassian, Ferrex and all this stuff. And then, it comes to a boiling point in the pressure cooker of the factory. And that's where all the action happens.
Yeah, and that's our first real action in the show in the first 3 episodes. Like for the most part, it's mostly just kind of like back building on Cassian in the first place. And then we get to the next arc of the show, which to me slows down a little bit. I don't know how you felt about that part.
Well, I mean, it's a setup, kind of like, because the next arc is the heist, which is interesting because, okay, confession here, it's good to go in, maybe having only watched Rogue One, but then, you hear some things like that. And, one thing that keeps on being said about Andor, like, oh, it's a heist show. I thought the heist would be closer to the end. It's the second arc here. And, of course, when you set up a heist, things start to go slow at first and then it builds up. So that's what was going on.
Yeah, that is fair. So we get to see a little bit more of like networking, right? We get to see Luthen interacting with the money, basically, right? We get to see him interacting. So Luthen, who is a person kind of like, trying to smuggle money and move money and organize things behind the curtain for the rebellion, is posing as an antiques dealer on Coruscant, and he like is interacting with politicians who are basically allies to the cause. He's trying to continue working these connections to support their fight, and we get to see more and more people coming into this network. Essentially, like you mentioned, the whole network board, basically. Yep. Like this is just more and more strings connecting together with like people who are embezzling money to them. We get to see his connections with more of the rebels, which is the build-up to the heist. Essentially, they're trying to acquire funds to support themselves, or support the cause.
Right.
And we get to see Cassian join this like rebel group with some people he will and will not get along with, particularly. There's a lot of build-up in this next arc in episode 4, 5, and 6. Which for me slowed down, that I had a little bit of difficulty trying to not keep up, but I
mean that it's normal because like in the second act, it's usually in the build up act, it's like okay, it's hard to keep your interest because it's there's not a whole lot of action.
Yeah, it's a lot of setting up dominoes basically before I can actually have fun and watch the dominoes fall.
Exactly, like when you're setting up dominoes, that's not the fun part. It's the knocking the dominoes down.
This arc is pretty important to understand too, like why everyone's doing what they're doing in the first place, basically. Yeah. We do get a good bit of action though near the end of the arc where they essentially complete the heist. They infiltrate a garrison to acquire Imperial credits. And here's the first, not the first, but like here's some action where we see the rebels doing some underhanded tactics, right? They essentially take some people hostage, like not just like the Imperial soldiers, like they take like their family hostage.
Yeah, the wife and kids.
Yeah, wife and kids, and like so it's like I think Cassian said it in Rogue One, where he kind of brings up the point that like you don't know what they've had to do, you know what I mean, to make the rebellion happen, basically.
Yep.
And this is basically like a quick little taste of what they've done. They're the good guys in this story, but they're not doing good things. And we get to see more of a nuanced view and more intricate view of what it is to make the rebels work in the first place. Anything you want to cover here before we move on to next section?
I mean the heist itself is pretty cool.
It's a good overall episode. I really enjoy it. That one would be episode 6, I think, when everything kind of culminates in that point, right?
Yep, the Eye, which is interesting because it also involves natural occurrence that happens on Aldhani, which is really cool. Nice, beautiful part, and everything builds up to that point. So that's something that definitely not to miss.
And you mentioned before, like where the fact that like you heard that this was like a heist, kind of like series, right? The fact that it happens relatively early on, it kind of threw me off as well too when I got to it. So here's actually one of these things that I read in an article. Essentially, episode 7 is actually a bit of like a standalone episode, which kind of broke the like the little mini arc series that they were kind of doing here. I mean, it is a halfway point, first off, but we see the aftermath, essentially. All of the interactions that Cassian had on Ferrix, like things are starting to move now, basically. And then we also get to see a lot more action in terms of like why the Empire starts to get their hands all over everything in the later part of the story as well too, and how they start to seize power in places all around the galaxy. The episode doesn't have as much action in it, but very much so the tension definitely rises up in this episode. In terms of leading up to the second half of the whole series.
Right. I mean, storytelling wise, it's the point where you kind of take a breather after a major action event.
Yeah,
and then it also sets the pieces up for the next section, which is actually probably my favorite section.
The next arc would be episode 8 through 10. This is the prison arc, which this is when I was like, I am all in on the show. Like, because, like, again, as much as, like, episode 6 was the excitement that I was looking for initially, away from the politicking and the backroom dealings, right? Like, there was, like, boom, boom, pew, action. 8 through 10 is some of, like, the biggest drama, I think, of this show.
Big time. So,
Cassian, essentially, Cassian kind of made out from the heist thing, kind of, like, scot-free.
Yeah,
and then
the show could have just cut off. Then Cassian could have just lived his life. Had a good time, and then that's it. But obviously, we know that he can't. Yeah, he can't because between episodes 1 through 6 of the show, and then Rogue One, a lot happens, obviously, and that's one of the difficulties about the show is that we know what the end point is, and it's the big thing of how to get there. And this is the episodes 8 through 10 are a huge part of the how he got there. So
yeah, very much so of like why he becomes a because he's technically not part of the rebellion at this point at the end of episode 6 or 7.
Yeah, no, he was just a guy that was brought in. Luthen saw some promise in him, and then
basically treated him like a mercenary. Like he was a hired gun essentially.
Yep.
We have episode 8 through 10, which is the prison arc, which is a lot of tension. A lot of really good interactions with a lot of more characters getting introduced here, and a really, really cool interactions between a lot of these major characters. And I think one of my favorite characters shows up in this section as well too, Kino Loy.
Oh, he's my favorite character out of the whole
show, right?
First season,
I think, first season, yeah. Kino Loy is played by Andy Serkis, and he plays this like hard ass head prisoner, I guess, if you want to call it that, I guess. He's the guy who runs the floor that he's brought in on in the prison. And we get to see a lot of tension here. Basically, this is a prison break essentially. We get a heist and a prison break in the same series.
Yeah, buy one get one free.
Yeah, it's great. This is a really good this is a really good arc, really good storyline here that I think they really did very much some justice to, and also probably one of the coolest sets I think I've seen in in Star Wars. The prison itself is very, I guess it's like sanitized. I guess is the feel of the whole prison, right?
Yeah.
But it's so stark in comparison to everything else we've seen.
Right. The only thing that would come close would be, at least in this series, would be the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau. You know how things are stark there, but this is even way more stark. It's essentially like, open your eyes and all you see is light, and it's just white, bright white all around.
It's like if you crossed a hospital with a prison.
Yeah.
I guess that's the only way I can really explain it, right? That's basically what it looks like.
Including the one of the most important parts, which is, it's a prison without bars. I mean, it's got walls. There's walls, there's rooms and stuff like that. But the big thing is, is the floor. And then how do they keep him in line? Well, listeners, imagine that you go into a prison. It's not a typical prison with all the, bars, barbed wire, anything like that. Like there's nothing. It's an island. It's in the middle of the ocean. Okay, can't escape that way. Or you could if you could swim. Anyway, but the floor is just metal. They tell the prisoners to take their shoes off, and the way that they keep them in line is they electrify the floor. They give them a shock, and you see that within the first couple minutes of them getting there. So, they keep the floor. They can electrify the floor. They also have stun stun batons and things like that. But that's how they keep everyone in line, because at a certain point too, because each prisoner has his own cell. The cells are kind of connected in a really interesting cubbyhole kind of way.
Yeah.
But there are no bars, and they electrify the floor. So if you step on it, and then we see that later on. So
yeah, we see a really like, it's not super grisly, right? But we see a prisoner who had clearly had enough, and they take their own life by stepping onto the electrified floor at night, and basically just off themselves that way. And it's pretty dark when you really look at it, especially again like in a Star Wars property, right? Where some dude just takes their own life because of the bleakness of their own situation. There's a bunch of action here where, which incites like a prison break sequence, which is awesome, right? The way they take over the prison is sick. they essentially like they break a water pipe so they can't electrify the floor on that area, and then they basically bust out from there, taking over the entire prison, and then they essentially incite a riot inside the rest of the prison once they realize there's not enough guards to stop them from rioting. Basically, it's so awesome. It's so good. I love this section so much, and this is the part when I was watching this show, I was like, why is no one else watching this show? I just want to talk about this part.
Especially as led by the reluctant, at first reluctant Kino Loy, because Kino Loy, once again played by Andy Serkis brilliantly, and it's interesting when you meet Kino Loy and you're like, oh, he's played by Andy Serkis, this guy's going to be important, and then you find out why. Because at first he's like, nope, just stay with the program, just stick with everything, do what you're told, keep your head down, fulfill your sentence, and then you get out of here.
Yeah, basically.
But then once he finds out that you don't, that's when he goes nuts. And then the way that he led it, and it's kind of cool because it could have been Cassian. Could have been Cassian leading the revolt, but Cassian's like, hey, no, Kino, you got to be the one to do this.
You have the power here.
Yeah. And then he gets on the loudspeaker all throughout the prison, and yeah, it was like a Braveheart moment.
Yeah. Him having like the trust of the other prisoners behind him. Like Cassian needed him to really get everybody else to rally on his side, basically. And it's a really, really powerful moment in the show. And then I guess we ended off with like the last two episodes. Last two episodes here, where we see a lot more action again back on the original planet where Cassian came from, where we start to see the energy start to like rile up here, right? We start seeing Imperial like stormtroopers like patrolling areas, right? We see like essentially it's like the they're locking down an area and through power by using armed soldiers to like basically keep an eye on everything. And you see the people of Ferrix start to like bubble over in anger and with the tensions of the area. Basically, we see it happen. We see the moment where the village of the city that's being oppressed, it basically says, we're not taking this anymore, and they basically start rioting and start fighting, and like properly rebelling and in like conflict with the Empire here, which is really intense. We essentially see like we get to see the story of like Star Wars from like a processor civilian point of view, which is super heavy in this particular section, again, because we get to see like why the rebels do what they do, and you like how people come together and rally behind the cause, because of the fact that they're being oppressed by the Empire, and they're basically getting all their power taken away from them.
Yeah, it's essentially kind of a primer on how to set up a resistance. Not to say that we should watch Andor for that particular purpose.
No, exactly.
There are other ways to do it, and listener, we're watching you.
But yeah, like it's there's a lot of really powerful moments in this in like the ending of this show, right? We get to see definitely Cassian's like mother figure die basically, and while there's a lot of like traditional kind of cultural ceremony stuff going on, right? It's like a traditional ceremony, like funeral procession happening, and you can just see like there's tension here, right? There's guards everywhere. There's people who are like very much so on edge and on guard with them as well too.
Yep.
And
on top of that, you do have the Imperial forces keeping an eye out for Cassian, because they know that he's a rabble rouser, and he's definitely on. He's a big point on their radar. It's his mom that died, so they know that he's either going to show up or it'd be really messed up. So he's got to be there.
Yeah.
And that's when they want to get him, and not just them, but also Luthen and Vel, because once again, the only person tying Luthen to the heist and all the other things that went on, apart from Vel, but Vel's on his side, is Cassian, and he doesn't know if if Cassian will snitch. So Luthen and Vel are out to kill Cassian. So
yeah,
there's a lot of things are happening to Cassian.
There's a lot of like interweaving plot points that happen throughout the entire show, which as much as I said before with the whole politicking side of it, the writing for the show is extremely tight. Again, like for a guy who kind of like I personally don't really fall too much into like this whole like there's can I call it like a House of Cards element, right? There's a lot of politics going on essentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, even though I didn't watch House of Cards.
Okay, well, so there's a lot of it, right? There's a lot of quote unquote boring stuff. Again, for me, like boring stuff that happens in this show. That because the way that the writing is done and the way that they interweave all of these multiple storylines and to tell a cohesive story about the importance of Cassian to the rebellion. Again, I'm like, why is no one watching this? Even if you're not a Star Wars fan, the thing of the show was written to be more accessible. And it's like you hear like a heist, a sabotage, a prison break. Like, yeah, this is absolutely up my alley. Versus like the Mandalorian, which I feel like I couldn't escape.
Right. You see Baby Yoda all over the place.
Yeah, like Mandalorian is a Western, much simpler, much easier to follow along to. But this one being more almost like a heist, almost political thriller, right? Was very interesting for me. It was a very interesting show, and like I'm glad you at least got around to seeing it.
Oh yeah, finally. I mean, it was on my list. It was just, and it was good that, you got your podcast where you introduce things. So I actually held off on watching it because, we talked about earlier, like, okay, what could we do? I'm like, okay, this was on my list. Let's do it.
It really worked out for us, right? Again, I just wanted somebody else to talk to about the show, and I'm sure you and me are going to go into a little bit more detail, on our own after the episode as well too. But like, we didn't want to cover too much. We don't want to spoil everything for this show because again, this show has a lot going on. But just kind of covering at least like the major beats of each individual arc, I guess, is really, really important. Or at least getting the ideas of what's happening in each of these arcs is kind of what we want to cover without spoiling too much. Again, if you haven't seen Andor, go watch it first. And and if our garbage explanation of the show is any little bit interesting to you, I think even more so go watch the show. And even then, because our explanation was pretty. Again, we're not covering a lot of it. Go watch the show for yourself. Make your own decision from that point as well, too.
Especially because world building was a huge part of it. I mean, There's so many. We didn't even scratch the surface. The surface is still very much intact. So you got to get in. You want to see how the Imperial forces work. You want to see what life is like on these planets, how these cultures come together. What cultures are there? For example, like the funeral ceremony on Ferrix. Like, how does it happen? How does you know yeah, Cassian's adopted mother fit in, and what do they do, and all these other kinds of things. The prison. Like we barely scratched the surface. So you got to
that's
watch.
like that is like actually absolutely an arc that I if as long as you know the basic part of it, like I think people should just watch that section. You know what I mean? If you just watch like if you watch like episode like what is it? When does he get arrested? Episode 7? Episode 6?
I think it was 7.
7.
Yeah,
Episode
7.
like honestly, episode 7 through episode 10 is like you could watch it by itself. I think
Yeah.
you can if you don't care about anything else about Star Wars, this is basically just like I just want to watch this dude escape from prison. This is a really really good bit, and again like Diego Luna, like he does a fantastic job in this entire series. So does everybody else, honestly. The cast is really really good for this show.
Oh, definitely.
Do you notice they use a lot of like European or like English actors here?
Yeah, and I think that might even be an intentional.
Yeah,
I mean, also because you watch the original, yeah, the Holy Trilogy, and essentially everyone in the Empire is British there, so it kind of makes sense. It also fits in, helps with continuity in that aspect. But something to think about, listener. That you have the Empire. A lot of them speak British, and let you think about it on your own.
You heard us UK fans were watching you guys.
I mean, it's not the UK now because we're they're no longer in the Imperial.
Yeah.
So yeah, UK listeners, y'all are cool.
Yeah.
But a couple generations ago, might have been a little sketchy, especially the ones that went to India.
I have a couple points I want to just talk about over here. I guess again, we've kind of covered very light blueprint of what the show is. Location variety of the show is there's some of the coolest scenes that I've seen in like Star Wars in general, right? Like I know that like there's a lot of like big lush greenery areas here, right? But I think that this has a very very cool lived in feel for like Ferrix has a very down to earth, like hardworking men and women alien people. They're just regular people essentially, right? They're regular civilians. We get to see a pretty good look of that throughout the show. We get to see again the prison scene is like stunning. I love the set for the prison scene. We know what the Empire like what their look is, right? It's very sanitized, but it's the very like very white walls, very business, very bureaucratic, right? Like the Star Destroyers are all black, right? But still very clean, right? Very much so like almost. That almost feels like a prison within itself. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But like I think that also might be why the prison feels so impactful because it's a prison and it's all white. Again, it feels like a hospital and a prison combined together. It's so striking because of it. But yeah, so it's like some really really well developed settings. I think pacing. Did you feel the same way? Like
it was cool.
The pacing overall for the show is pretty good. Again, the slow section for me was the build up, but again. It has to be there for to really bring you into the reasoning for why everything's happening, because like because we said before, like the heist, like the big kind of like sabotage episode was like episode 6, and I was confused on like what was going to happen after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the fact that we get to see an entire show from like a civilian point of view is very new, right? In the original trilogy, it's all from the front lines. The prequel trilogy is all the generals essentially, right? Like essentially, we get to see from that like the war room, the politicians, and then we don't talk about the sequel trilogy.
No, we shall never talk about that.
Yeah, we don't, yeah.
I mean, maybe The Force Awakens, but everything after that is just
it's fine. We will talk about that. But yeah, it's a refreshing point of view for the Star Wars universe.
And it's pretty cool because the way that it's Star Wars was very iconic in terms of following these very archetypal heroes, and now we're following them from the ground up. It's at a certain point where like if you're a fan of Firefly, I think you'll really like Andor.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I actually have heard that from one of the few people who I have talked about the show with. That it is very much they get Firefly vibes as well from this show.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Which I should probably go finish that actually as well too.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah, I really
That's
should.
that's more canon than the sequel trilogy.
But yeah, what about you? Any highlights? Any lowlights? Any nitpicks for you?
I mean, definite picks are the disgusting Star Wars names Keith Virgo.
That's a historic thing within the Star Wars universe. I feel like you hear names,
Scheme.
in Star Wars, and you kind of know who's a good guy or who's a bad guy.
Skeen, yeah.
Yeah, like you kind of just know. Like if you hear a name, that doesn't go away here. Unfortunately, I wish they would not be as like upfront about it. You know, so that way I can be led astray and then smacked in the face even harder when a twist happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, like that. Yeah, the Star Wars naming convention is like it's almost too on the nose, and it just not ruins, but it's like, man, I could have been like a story could have been way more impactful if I didn't have an inkling in the first place.
Yeah. Like Skeen. Wait till you find out what Skeen does.
Yeah.
Which is funny because I started to respect them kind of in the middle of it, and then yeah. But yeah, no, that's one little nitpick. Once again, not a big deal. Love the world building. Love how each individual worlds has its culture. Ferrix is big. Even Canari's, is interesting. Even though we only see it in little snippets here. Aldani had an interesting indigenous culture there, and then contrasted with the imperial culture.
Oh,
and then,
yeah,
of course, the prison.
Yeah, that was a really cool thing to see in that heist arc, episode 4 through 6. Yep. Where you see like again like just the imposing power of the Empire, right? Just like essentially just like dehumanizing and looking down upon like the native people of that area, basically of that planet.
Yep, condescending was the word you were looking for earlier.
There you go. Yeah, condescending. There we go. Again, the show does a really good job of like showing you the interaction between just regular people and the Empire. That's probably the thing I really focused on throughout the entire show. Like how everyone just like you see that their lives change once the Empire starts getting remotely involved. How there's like a fear of them. Again, we know that the Empire is bad, right? But like even more, but we know them from like the rebellion, from the warfighter side, not from the regular civilian side. It's very, very different feel, because while there are heroes here, we're not thinking of them as like the rebel pilots or Luke, Han, the main characters, like the big star characters. You know what I mean?
Archetypal legendary heroes.
Yeah, we're not seeing it from their perspective. We're seeing it from more of like, if you happen to be like a person from an area with an oppressive government, essentially, that's basically what this is kind of like a look into. But yeah, a lot of really cool storytelling bits here, and I think I genuinely believe it's probably one, if not the best Star Wars media that has come out in recent years.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And like you said, it was much tighter. They did a lot better editing here in terms of actual content, because I had issues with with Kenobi, some of the other stuff. But yeah, no, this one was great, and I look forward to seeing what season 2 has in store and how we bridge the gap from season 1 all the way up to Rogue One.
Yeah, there was a lot of storylines that they never finished off in the first season, so which is great, because again, this lets us know that there's absolutely more to come. And one final thing here, you brought this up in our discussion. We talked a little bit offline, before we started recording. But you pointed out that there was basically no reference to the Force in this show. Yeah.
And that's, once again, that was one of the things that I've always loved about Star Wars. That's one of the things that, kind of drew me in, that essentially religion,
their space magic, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Then the only very, very, very indirect reference here was, just a Kyber crystal. Oh, that, and there was a ship that had lightsabers coming out, although I don't think there were lightsabers per se, but that was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, very, very little touch of like the of the space magic aspect of Star Wars. Again, very much. Can you call it grounded in reality? Like,
yeah, I mean, as
right?
grounded in reality as you can with a Star Wars with Star Wars stuff. Yeah, for a lot of the people who are like, oh, it's a fantasy series. Oh, it's like this, it's like that. Like suspension of disbelief stuff. Apart from being in, a galaxy long time ago, and yeah, being a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's actually very grounded in what could be considered reality. In terms of like the relationships between people. Like, yeah, there's no like magic, no force here. It's just stuff people living in a futuristic world with. Yeah, sure, there's droids and things like that. But yeah, it's more grounded. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's accessible for people.
The way I is it very similar to the way that Rogue One felt, where it felt very lived in, which is kind of like what we got in the original trilogy, right? Like when you go into like, you go to Tatooine, you go to any of the main set pieces, basically, right? It feels like people have lived here. It's not just a set. Much more accessible, I think, to people who are not into the big bombastic parts of Star Wars that everyone else tends to think of right off the bat. Again, like, I really enjoyed the show. Again, listener, if you have seen the show, I hope you like our short little rundown here of what the show was without spoiling too much for the people who haven't heard it yet or haven't watched it yet. If you haven't watched the show and you actually listen to our entire, spiel here on why the show rules, go watch it. Like, what are you doing here? We told you to pause it earlier and go watch it first. But yeah, I guess that's really it for us right here.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the big thing is, because we didn't want to talk too much about it. The basic idea is just, hey, go watch it. It's good. You get 2 thumbs up from Lakan, 2 thumbs up from me. So put those thumbs on whatever you can use to watch Andor and go see it.
Yeah, cool. So thanks again for tuning in, listeners. We really appreciate you guys tuning in for this episode. Go ahead and give us a like, 5 stars on whatever respective podcast service you're listening to us on. Leave a review. Send us an email, tweet at us, whatever. We definitely go check through it. Yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.
I kind of didn't like at the beginning. He looks like Chris Martin from Coldplay. But then I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, there's something weird about this guy. And then you start to like him a little bit, start to respect him a little bit. And then now it's like, okay, my initial instincts were correct. I do not like this guy.